So we can officially begin. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to SUNYLA 2020. Terrific to have you here. We are going to start right on time. Not to worry, however, the recording of the session along with our presenter slides will be available on the conference website after things are wrapped up and files have been processed. During the presentation, if you have questions, please use the Q&A option rather than the chat. If your questions are for our presenters, please put them in the Q&A just so we can keep those sorted properly. And we'll wrap up in time for our presenters to be able to address those questions at the end. We will also conclude to give you about 10 minutes to shift gears and get ready to transition to our keynote speaker who comes immediately after this session. So the session is Reflective Practice Groups, a tool for building professional learning communities. And our presenters are Anjali and Alice, both from Monroe Community College, and they will share other details about their roles at MCC during the presentation. And away we go. Thanks, everyone.
So I'm Alice Wilson. I work at Monroe Community College, and I do a lot with instruction and outreach, and I've been involved with reflective practice groups for about 3 years now.
And I'm Anjali Parasnis-Samar, and I'm the Instructional Technologies Librarian at MCC. And I've been at MCC for about 3.5 years, and I've been involved in reflective practice groups for most of that time, about 3 years.
So I'm gonna just start sharing my screen. And our intention here today is to talk about reflective practice groups, give you a sense of how they work and how you might start one or implement one at your own institution. Oh, and here we are.
Okay, so we wanted to actually start with a quick activity. So if you could, in the chat, please type one thing that you need in order to work productively in a group. And we'll read a couple of these answers and talk a little bit about why we wanted to start with this question. So go ahead and type in the chat, what's one thing you need in order to work productively in a group? So we have a couple of them coming through. So camaraderie, a shared goal, clear and frequent communication, open conversations, a commitment to true collaboration in all participants, an agenda, trust. Another person says a shared goal, time to prepare, so things to read beforehand, good to know the goals of the group, honesty about expectations and abilities. Yeah, so the reason that we're asking this is that this is the type of question that we probably would ask on the first day of a reflective practice group. And the reason is that we want to kind of like surface our values and figure out how the group members are going to work together. And it's important to know kind of the expectations of everybody in the group and what helps everybody learn in a professional learning community. So this would be part of a protocol, which is basically a structured discussion with a goal of some kind. And that sort of forms the basis of reflective practice groups. So this would be sort of a norm setting protocol where we would talk about how we're going to work together as a group and create a set of agreements that we can kind of stick to as we go through our conversations in future meetings. So, okay, that's kind of the lead in, and Alice, I think you have the next slide.
Ooh. So what are reflective practice groups? So we're going to share a video that our Teaching and Creativity Center put together about reflective practice groups. Please note they use the term critical friends group, which is just a synonym for reflective practice group, and you might hear that phrase interchangeably.
So during a Critical Friends group meeting, colleagues get together and either share some student work or something that a teacher's developed, or they might bring some kind of dilemma or problem, but there's always an area of focus. And in that area of focus, we then work through a protocol in order to deeply think about what's going on with that. And it's a great place where you get a lot of feedback, and that feedback is really structured, so it's sort of safe feedback, and you feel like, wow, these people are really looking at my work, they're really considering what I'm doing, and we're really reflecting on that together, and you walk away with a sense of, I can really change some things and make some things a lot better.
We create a trusting environment by starting with expecting all of our participants to be at every meeting for the whole time. That allows us to start by developing norms together and figuring out how we're going to work together as a community. And that's how we develop our trusting environment.
Several of us on campus have been trained. It was a 5-day, pretty intensive training that we went through to facilitate these groups. And we work from a book of protocols that are really structured in a great way so that we use the time really well. It's not an open-ended discussion that could go in any direction. It's very interactive and discussion-oriented, but the time is broken down so that no one person can take over all the time. And likewise, there's an expectation that all of us are going to contribute in the course of a 90-minute or 2-hour discussion.
I've gone and I've talked about, like, here is a student that has completely upset me, like I can't get through to them, and like they're not nice to me, and I don't know what to do about it, and that's very uncomfortable, right? Because now I've just totally admitted to a group of professionals, many of whom way outrank me, you know, that I am not totally successful. But the CFG is designed to be a trusting community where we're there for a certain purpose.
The way I look at it is, you know, this teaching thing is kind of a lonely gig, right? And we are isolated a lot in our own little class or office. And this is a great vehicle for us to come, get together with colleagues, and you find out you're not so alone.
Yeah, so just want to point out that both Anjali and I have each taken facilitation training at MCC, and we co-facilitate, each of us co-facilitate a reflective practice group, and I think both of us have done that for about 2 years. And I want to point out that the people in this video are all teaching faculty, but our RPGs at our institution have expanded to include librarians. My group, we have the chief diversity officer in our group and also an advisor. So reflective practice groups can be for all educators. And the group that we work with is a group called the School Reform Initiative. They developed the idea of reflective practice groups. They provide training and support, and they've developed the protocols that we use to facilitate conversation. And they were originally a K through 12 organization, but now they've expanded their reach to include educators from colleges and universities. And what I like about their mission is that they really focus on equity. Equity is at the center of their work, and they work very hard to improve learning for all students, so that student learning is always at the center of everything that they do, everything that we do when we have our meetings and our discussions. So how does a reflective practice group work?
So protocols, as I said, are really the basis of reflective practice groups. And I'm going to read this quote from the SRI resource and protocol book that we use to describe protocols. So A protocol consists of agreed upon guidelines for a conversation. It's the existence of this structure, which everyone understands and has agreed to, that permits a certain kind of conversation to occur, often a kind of conversation that people are not in the habit of having. So protocols can feel really clunky at first because they're putting sort of artificial boundaries and limits on our conversation. But as you start to do them, like over time, you really start to see their power. They create safety in the conversation, conversational equity, efficiency, and you'll see what I mean later when we go through some of the protocols. But really, overall, they're sort of creating boundaries by setting aside time specifically for listening, noticing, thinking, and speaking. And this really does allow you to have deeper, more powerful conversations. And also conversation starters. You know, the protocol isn't necessarily the end of the conversation that you're having, but it is a sort of a unit to start off a conversation. Okay, next slide. So protocols are carefully crafted in order to encourage different types of conversation. So you can see here kind of the range of the types of conversations that are available through protocols. So depending on the degree of trust that's in the group, so have you just sort of formed and you're just kind of getting to know each other, or have you been meeting for a year and you really know each other well and there's a lot of trust in the group, you might choose different protocols. Also, depending on the dilemma that you're talking about, you want to choose a protocol that sort of fits that dilemma. And that's the role of the facilitator of the group. So I should also say that most protocols have a facilitator and a presenter. So the presenter kind of brings the dilemma to the group. The facilitator facilitates the conversation around that dilemma. So just as a kind of a few examples of the types of protocols that exist, there are protocols, if you look at this chart, there's protocols for sharing experiences. So these are kind of, again, like getting to know each other, getting to know what people think about different topics. So one example is a chalk talk. I really like that one. It's where you put a question up on a chalkboard or a whiteboard usually, and then everybody gets a pen and they can kind of walk around and write their answers to the question, and you can draw connections. You can sort of like draw a little offshoot of somebody's question and say like, yes, this is really true, or I don't agree with this, or whatever you want to do. And you can actually do this we've done this a couple of times in a virtual format too, where you can do this online as well. There's plenty of tools, but you're completely silent through the protocol. So the conversation is really all in written form. There's also text-based discussions if you want to talk about a text. There's discussions for looking at data. There's also protocols for dilemmas of practice. So that's where you're kind of bringing something like you heard in the video, where there's, you have a sort of a thorny issue and you're bringing it into the group. And there's protocols that are focusing on equity and social justice. So we're going to look at a couple of examples of these different type of protocols in a minute.
Okay. Okay, so oftentimes in reflective practice groups, we'll explore an article or a chapter of a book, and oftentimes these readings are challenging. There is a lot to unpack. I really like this text-based protocol. It's called 3 Levels of Text. And I like it because it helps you develop a deeper understanding of the reading, but also it helps you more readily connect the reading to your own practice, allows you to see the implications for your own practice. So what happens is in this protocol, participants get a few minutes to scan the text, and sometimes they get the reading ahead of time, and if it's lengthier, but they scan the text and they take note of places in which they can see the implications for their own work. And then we go in rounds. So each person has up to 3 minutes to read the text they've selected. And if another person has selected that text, they can pick another passage. They share what they think about the passage, their interpretation of it, and then what they see as the implication for their own work. And then the rest of the group has up to 2 minutes to respond to what they've said. And each person has a chance to do that. So, and then again, that can be a starting point for a wider conversation, or maybe some quiet reflection, whatever the facilitator decides. Another, Anjali mentioned that people often bring dilemmas to the reflective practice group. So one protocol that we often use is called the consultancy protocol. And in the consultancy protocol, the presenter has up to, I think, 15 minutes to present their dilemma, the dilemma that they're struggling with. And they can share artifacts, just give everybody the context for their problem, the problem that they're working on. So one dilemma that I've brought in the past is, that may be familiar to some of you, is how can I better facilitate group work in one-shot instruction sessions for introductory level classes. I was able to do group work with 200 level classes, honors level classes, but just for introductory level classes, something just wasn't working, and it's something that I really was really thorny for me. So so after I presented my dilemma, I presented the group with that question, so that question that they can focus on. So then the participants have a chance to ask clarifying questions of the presenter, and those clarifying questions are questions that will elicit brief factual answers, and the purpose is to give the participants a better understanding of the presenter's dilemma. And then we move into probing questions, and those questions are designed to help the presenter expand their own thinking. So a good probing question is one that elicits a response from the presenter, like, oh, I never really thought about it like that. So for example, maybe with my dilemma, somebody might say, what do you assume to be true about students in introductory classes? So once we're finished with probing questions, the group starts to talk about the presenter's dilemma, but they do so without the presenter participating in the discussion though. So the presenter kind of moves to the side and they just listen and they take notes. So that lasts about 10 or 15 minutes. And then the presenter is invited back to the group and they reflect back on what they heard. So, and I just want to stress that with a consultancy protocol, with any protocol that focuses on a dilemma, that you don't necessarily solve the dilemma in that meeting, but you definitely kind of help unravel the knottiness of it. And then it makes it easier for you to go back later and reflect and work on it some more.
So both of those are kind of individual, well, actually the text-based protocol is more of a discussion, but the consultancy protocol is more of an individual-based protocol. But there's also protocols that are more focused on kind of like group development or group conversation. So an example of this is the Paseo. And I'll just read sort of the description, the purpose of this from our book. So when a group would like to examine issues of identity, diversity, beliefs, and values, and would like to begin making connections between who they are and how that shapes their decisions and behaviors. So I've facilitated this protocol a couple of times and I really like it because it kind of gets people up and moving and talking. So there's two steps to it. The first step is to really reflect on your identity, and then the second step is to have a conversation. So in the first step, participants, you can see this kind of diagram there with the circle in the middle and the several circles around it. So participants write their name in the middle, and then they write different aspects of their identity, sort of shooting off of that name. So you know, this can be your ethnicity, your race, your cultural background, language, gender, class, so on. And then you do a little bit of reflection on that. And then you come together into these sort of concentric circles. So everybody gets up and you might have like, say, six people in the middle sort of facing outward, and then 6 people standing opposite them facing inward. So you get like 2 circles of people in pairs. And then the facilitator asks some questions, and the participants get like a minute to just kind of quietly reflect, and then each participant gets 2 minutes to respond to the question to their partner. So they do that, and then and then everybody actually rotates. So the outside circle moves 1 step over, and the facilitator asks another question, and you get to have a conversation with a new partner. The same process of reflection and then sharing. And the questions are usually, you design them, the facilitator designs them to kind of build on each other. So one example is that one time when I facilitated this, the first question was, share a memory about how you came to know a positive part of your identity or had a positive experience associated with your identity. And people rotated. The next question was, when did an aspect of your identity help you connect with a student? Everybody rotated. And then the question was, when did an aspect of your identity hinder your connection with a student? So you can kind of see the conversation building up. So that's the paseo.
Okay.
So we wanted to talk about like why we participate in reflective practice groups and what we've sort of gotten out of it. So I'll start, and then I'll give Alice a chance to also talk about it. So, like I said, I started working at MCC about 3.5 years ago, and I joined a reflective practice group my very first full semester. And the next year, I completed a 5-day training to become an RPG facilitator myself. And then I've been a facilitator for about 2 years, so this is my second year facilitating the RPG group. And it's been incredibly valuable for me. So, as a new employee, it really helped me connect to and feel part of a community of faculty from throughout the college that was engaged in reflection and professional development on teaching. And this community really spans like across MCC campuses and departments. So I don't think that I could have found that community as quickly or easily without reflective practice groups as a new person at MCC. It built my confidence and skill in facilitating meetings and events. So because my role is actually to provide library support for online teaching, a large part of my job includes training and supporting faculty. So I came to MCC pretty confident in my skill at teaching students, but facilitating faculty workshops and trainings was kind of a new challenge for me. So I wasn't really sure how to approach it. So the protocols and strategies that I learned through reflective practice groups, and also like the leadership experience that I got in terms of facilitating reflective practice groups, really helped me become like more effective and confident when I was facilitating in other contexts. It helped me improve my instruction by giving me opportunities for feedback and problem solving. So, it really directly sort of helped with my information literacy instruction. So it gave me insight into the information literacy needs of students that faculty were seeing in their classes that I don't necessarily know otherwise, because we had these conversations and they would talk about what their students were doing and what problems they were having with research. And it also kind of helped me develop like a more intentional reflective approach to my instruction just by improving my listening skills, really. And then finally, it helped me indirectly engage in library outreach. So by providing like opportunities to communicate with faculty about pedagogy and learning outcomes and other things that we talk about as librarians, it really helped them sort of see organically what we're doing in the library, to sort of see us as peers, as like fellow educators and as faculty. So it's been really, really useful for me in so many ways.
So I want to echo, Anjali, are you done?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I don't want to step on you. It's hard with Zoom I know. Yeah, so I wanted to echo a lot of what Anjali has said in terms of what she's gained from it. I have become a much better listener from participating in RPGs. They really do emphasize listening as much as talking. And I've incorporated reflection into everything I do, from teaching or everything. As much as I appreciate librarian feedback on my work, I do like having a non-librarian eye look what I do. I think they offer a different perspective, and of course I learn from listening to their dilemmas, because oftentimes it's interesting to see, a faculty member sees things in a similar way than I do, and I see similarities. I've also applied a lot of what I've done in reflective practice groups to my own work, both in the classroom, but also with the library staff. So there's a protocol that we've used at the library to help set goals. It's called the goal setting protocol. And we used it to set goals for the coming year with our staff. And we've also used Chalk Talk at meetings. And it's a really great way to brainstorm and elicit a lot of different opinions in a different way than conversation, and it allows like everyone to have a say and not one voice or two voices to dominate the conversation. And as a white female cisgender educator, I really have appreciated the opportunity to explore equity issues. Reflective practice groups and protocols make it so much easier to explore issues of equity. So I really appreciate that opportunity. So next steps. What if you're interested in exploring reflective practice groups further? So if you want to see if you want to start one at your own institution, what we'd recommend that you do is get in contact with your equivalent of the Teaching and Creativity Center, and then connect with the School Reform Initiative. So we have the website address up here, www.reforminitiative.org, and they provide all sorts of training. They even provide remote training. And then they also, all the protocols that we've listed are actually available for free on their website. So if you're interested in the Chalk Talk, that intrigues you, or you just want to explore further, just go to their website and click on, I can't see it myself because something's in the way, but something in resources, and you can, protocols and resources, and you can look at the protocols. And we are actually open to starting a reflective practice group for people that work in libraries. So if you are interested, if you are intrigued, please feel free to reach out to us. Our email addresses are right here. And obviously we'd be meeting through Zoom to do that, because we'd like to make it a regional effort. And I think.
Thank you, Alice and Anjali. Excellent time management and also very interesting information. There are a number of questions in the Q&A, and I think you can probably see those yourself, but I think for the purposes of the recording, I'll go ahead and read each question. So the first was, what is the best way to get one of these groups started on campus? And then a second question is, once the group is started, how often does the group meet?
Okay, so I'll answer that one, Anjali. Or I'll get started. So Jessica, yeah, so the best way to get the group started is, I think, to talk to whoever runs your teaching and creativity center, and share this presentation with them, and tell them about SRI, introduce that to them. My second question is, how often does the group meet? It depends on the group. My group meets once a month, which I think is fairly typical. Anjali, how often does your group meet?
Yeah, we also meet once a month.
Yeah, and that works well for us because we're all busy. And it takes a while to plan a reflective practice group meeting if you want to do it so thoughtfully. So once a month works for us.
Yeah, and typically, like, my group meets for about an hour and a half. I feel like that's kind of standard, but people will meet for longer or shorter periods of time depending on their needs.
We meet for an hour and a half as well, and that's just enough time. It's like, I think an hour is too short because you do a lot of reflecting, and that takes time. So it's a mix of dialogue, but also there's quiet time. And so it gives us, it's enough space to do all that.
And Jessica had a related question. Is there a maximum and minimum number of people in a group that makes them successful?
It's pretty flexible, I think. So the smallest group that I've had was 5 people. And that was it. Sometimes I wanted it to be bigger, but it worked really well because you could have like really in-depth conversations. You just had more time for everybody to respond to questions and that kind of thing. So I would say like 4 or 5 people is probably the minimum. There are protocols that are made for really large groups of people. So you can actually do this with, whatever, I don't know, 30 people, more than that. With certain protocols. You can also break people up into subgroups. So I don't think there's a problem with the group kind of getting larger and larger. You just kind of need at least 4 or 5 people for it to work well.
Yeah, and I think it takes a little bit more skilled facilitation if the group is significantly larger. I'm with Anjali. I think the largest group, the group I co-facilitate now is 8 people total, and that seems to work for us because there's always somebody always has something to bring to the table. There's always somebody, so it's helpful.
Okay, thank you. And another question, is the facilitator training available at your institution, or was that through SRI?
Yes. It's through our Teaching Creativity Center, and the head of our Teaching Creativity Center, who you saw in the video, Gina, she has been trained through SRI. So she both does training, but she also brings people in. And actually, Anjali and I are doing a retreat this week with Jean Thompson Grove, who is one of the founders of SRI.
Yeah, but the initial 5-day training was through the Teaching and Creativity Center as an affiliate to SRI.
Great, thank you. Could you talk about how you did Chalk Talk virtually? And with regards to Paseo, do you think it could be modified to be used as an icebreaker with students in a credit-bearing research course as opposed to a one-shot session?
Yes. So we just did the Chalk Talk virtually yesterday, actually, in this retreat that we were in. So do you remember, Alice, what the app was that we used?
It starts with a J. But it was a virtual
Jot something. Jot, was it Jot board or something like that? But like any of those kinds of, we've even done it, I think we've done it in like Google Slides. So if you put up some kind of like a shape or a question, you can do it in Google Slides. So you put up, that initial question, and then other people can kind of just add their comments.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Google Meets tool is Jamboard.
Jamboard, that's what it was. Yeah.
And some I don't know, more commercial versions of Zoom has a whiteboard, and I think so does Collaborate.
Yeah. So we've done, like, my reflective practice group, we've actually met after the college has closed due to COVID, and we've done it virtually, although we haven't done the Chalk Talk yet.
Yeah, we also have been meeting virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question was about the Paseo. I think, so it takes some time. So that would be my only thing about doing it as an icebreaker. I think it would be a good icebreaker, but you would probably need to allot like 30 minutes for it to, for you to really have time to do both phases of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it would be a good one to do with students. I'm almost wondering though if like you would want to build some trust first before doing it, just because it is talking about identity, and that can be kind of a topic that it's important to have those like group agreements and trust before you kind of get into those kinds of issues.
We've actually been talking at our retreat about how important it is to build trust, and how to start off with like low trust activities that are just maybe typical icebreakers where you talk about fun things, and then starting to invite risk with activities like the Paseo.
Thank you. And a question from the chat. Have you come across, or do you have any experience with using this type of model with student workers, maybe as part of an experiential learning program?
No, actually. So is the idea that I'm wondering if the idea is if this it would be a reflective practice group and the students would be part of the reflective practice group?
I can let you know if the person who posted that question gives you an answer in the meantime.
That's a clarifying question.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't done that, but it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think that we have done a lot of the members of Reflective Arts Group have talked about using protocols with their students. So I think it's definitely something that's very friendly to being used with students.
Yeah. And like sometimes I think I've adapted protocols. I don't do them exactly as they do in the book because they can be a little bit stilted in a class situation.
Yeah, so the follow-up is the students as peers. So they'd be their own reflective practice group guided by a staff mentor, for example.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think that could work because I think it's important for like peers to learn from each other. And I think it's important that whoever facilitates is a skilled facilitator. But definitely I think these principles can be applied to students as well as educators.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that seems to happen with reflective practice groups is that, at least in my experience, like it starts out with the group facilitator having a very strong role as facilitator, and then as people kind of get skilled in the protocols, that spreads out a bit, and there is a lot more sort of like peer leadership within the group. So it would be cool to see that happen with students, like if you sort of started out as the facilitator, but then the students got that sort of experience leading those conversations.
Yeah, it would definitely be interesting if the student workers learning how different employers work in different organizational structures and dynamics among coworkers and so forth. That could be really educational and helpful to be a part of that. Another question from the Q&A, can this approach be modified if our libraries will remain physically closed and librarians are working only 50% in their library and 50% or more from home?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. So we've had to adapt, once the library is closed, like we've been meeting virtually. So if you're meeting 50% in the library, or if you're working 50, if you're splitting your time between the library and at home, I think it's important that all members of the group meet in the same way. So as long as you can meet either in person or online, that should work.
Yeah, and I know that SRI has provided some training on facilitating groups online. So I think Gina has taken some training on facilitating groups online. So they've definitely thought through how this can be translated to the online environment.
Yeah, I think it connects back to the point you were making earlier about having the trust built. So it might be hard to start a new group in this hybrid way, but maybe if it's already established, that might make a difference. I don't know, be worth a try.
Yeah, I think it's important to really focus on the phrase that we learned yesterday was connection before content. So with any group, it's important to spend a lot of time building that trust and building connection with each other. And because with these groups, you are going to be vulnerable. You need to be vulnerable in order to grow. So that trust needs to be there.
Yeah.
But I don't even think you need to meet in person in order to have that happen. Like one thing we've done is that you can go into breakout rooms and you can have one-on-one conversations with people. So there's definitely ways to facilitate it through Zoom where you can build that trust and create that community online.
That's good. And then the last question in our queue right now, perfect timing. What protocols do you recommend to help students explore equity issues within a first-year diversity class?
Taking a look.
So there's a number of protocols that are focused on equity. I think some of the text-based protocols can be like a sort of gentle lead into those conversations because they just provide a way to read a text and then kind of apply it to yourself. So depending on the readings that you select, I could see it being really applicable to that kind of a class. Like if you're reading something that might elicit emotions in the students, having that structure to the conversation can kind of make those conversations easier. Mm-hmm. So that would be maybe sort of like the first level of like trust building. And then you might be able to get into some of these other protocols, which are actually asking people to talk about their own identities and experiences and share that kind of stuff. And SAO is one, there's also several others.
I think we've used the chalk talk before in equity conversations. And what I like about that is you're writing on a board. And so it makes the conversation feel a little bit less intense. People are having their say, but it feels a little bit safer than a conversation. But then of course, you can use what you're reading as a jumping off point for a discussion. I'm looking at the book right now. I have the book in front of me, and there's a whole section of protocols emphasizing equity and excellence. And the PSEO is listed here, and as are some others, but it'd be worth maybe exploring and seeing if anything speaks to you.
And Alice, in fact, in the chat, there was a question, could you share information on the book you're using? And that was available on the SRI site?
Yeah. So that's available on the SRI site, and I can put the full, I'll put the full citation in our presentation, so when this is live, people can go back to the PDF. But I can I can get out of here and show you where it is, where you can find the protocols on the website. That's okay?
Yeah, certainly there's time. That'd be great.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is the school reform website. And if you go to, I've shared the address with you, and it's right up here too, schoolreforminitiative.org. And right over here are the protocols. Just a moment. Okay, and there's a alphabetical list. I don't think that they're organized by type as they are in the book. So I'll get that the citation for you so you can purchase the book.
Protocols by tag. I wonder if that.
Oh yeah, that's my tag. Yeah, so you can go by tag as well. So if you want interested in exploring student work, if you want to do something on team building, you can look at those protocols. But let's see, equity. We have equity. Tuning for equity protocol, affinity groups. I feel like we've done affinity groups before.
Yeah, we've done affinity groups. Courageous conversations, I think we've done that too. The compass one.
Okay. The purpose of affinity groups is to build alliances across differences by making your own meaning with people who share your same or similar experiences. Okay, ground rules, what stays in the room. One of the, Anjali referred to agreements at the start of our presentation. And one of the most common agreements is confidentiality. So what goes on in the room stays in the room, and we don't share out, and that helps build trust. I'm not as familiar with this one. There's a few here.
There's the constructivist listening dyad is another good one, where you're really just talking to one person, but you know, you sort of have a question and you each respond to it, but the other person is just sort of listening and they aren't responding. You know, you don't have to like just be stone-faced staring at the person, but like you can nod and stuff, but you're not. It gives people space to talk without worrying about being interrupted or you know, reactions. Oh, I see a question. Do you use a different protocol for each meeting? It depends. So the protocol you choose really depends on the conversation that you want to have. So like if 2 meetings in a row, people are bringing in dilemmas, you might do the consultancy protocol two meetings in a row. But typically we mix it up and we do like a different protocol each meeting. You usually can only do like one protocol fully in a meeting because they do take like 40 minutes to an hour. So the way that I structure my meetings is usually there's some kind of an icebreaker that is like 30 minutes or less. And then most of it is spent on doing one protocol, depending on what topic we're discussing or what dilemma people have brought in.
Yeah, and the purpose of what you want to do in the group really drives what protocol that you use.
So there's also a goal setting protocol at the beginning of the meetings, like the very beginning of the year when you're working together as a group, where you kind of figure out your goals as a group together, and that also guides which protocols you might choose in later meetings.
And I think that Tim shared the SRI URL with everyone, so thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And so that brings us to the end of our list in the Q&A, and I think we picked up those couple that came in on the chat, so that's terrific, and it is pretty much exactly 9:50. Great job. Thank you very much, Alice and Anjali. You gave us a great deal to think about and learn, and tools I'm sure many of us can bring back in our own workplaces and maybe even our families.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Great to see all of you, or not to see you. Okay.
All right.
Anjali, I'll see you in 30 minutes, I suppose.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, bye everyone.
Thank you.